إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'd like to welcome you to my Muslim family's first ever live Q&A session. It is a great honor and great privilege for me to be hosting this auspicious event. We launched my Muslim family in December last year, and we've created a platform where we have brought together around 20 or so of the leading Islamic scholars, teachers, students of knowledge in the English-speaking world onto this one platform, creating content, courses, video series, delivered in a style that is accessible, that is relevant, and that is practical. So my Muslim family is about trying to build Muslim families that are loving, strong, focused on the hereafter, and high achieving. Now, as part of that whole package, we said we'd be delivering live Q&A sessions with experts, whether in Islamic knowledge or whether counselors or both. So today we are starting off our live sessions, and these will initially be taking place every week. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our guest, our esteemed guest, and that is Sister Rahma Abdul-Lateef. I'll just give a very short bio for her. Sister Rahma Abdul-Lateef is a systemic family psychotherapist, clinical supervisor, who is also qualified and accredited as a video interactive guidance practitioner. She has worked several years with individuals, couples, and families. She has also worked with young people presenting social, emotional, and mental health needs in hospital and community settings. She is passionate about ensuring that therapy is both accessible to people with regards to aspects of power and difference. She is a researcher in issues of cross-cultural practice and ways to increase equity, with a specific interest in providing therapy to families that is suitable and fits their cultural contexts and backgrounds. She currently works with children's services and in private practice. She is a university lecturer on a youth intensive psychological practitioner program. It is my very real honor and privilege to welcome Sister Rahma to our first live Q&A. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Rahma.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you, Sister Rahma?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
I'm fine, alhamdulillah. Very humble to be hosting this event with you here today. I crossed paths with you 20 years ago in Al-Muntada, mashallah tabarakallah. You were delivering some talks, and I have been aware of your work for many years. And I think it's really great that we can have a platform where the community can access people who are both knowledgeable but experienced in family, relationship type settings and issues. Before I get into the Q&A, I thought I'd just maybe hand over to you to give your own kind of thoughts upon what this kind of Q&A session will be about, or general advice you might want to give about family and relationships. And then I'll go through the questions with you. So over to you, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين جزاكم الله خيرا for inviting me and for having me here. I guess one of the ways that we work as a therapist or in the field that I work in, we don't normally take the expert position in the sense of being the expert in people's lives. So I would say my expertise would be my experience in doing work with families, but we normally hold the idea that families are the experts in their lives. And so whenever they need help, it's just to rethink, to reflect, and to think about changing maybe something that is upsetting the family, but they normally are the experts. So in that sense, then, we don't hold the answer. There isn't a general answer. Every family has a unique challenge, and therefore their answer is also unique. We don't tell people what to do in my work, so it's not that do this, this, and this, you'll solve your problem. But it's what can we do together and help you to think about what can be helpful. So I guess one of the things that I am really attracted to in my work is this idea of being reflective and or reflexivity. The idea that we stop, we think, we reflect, reevaluate, and then have a way forward in how to move on with whatever it is that is challenging us. And the reason that I really like the idea of reflection and reflexivity, it's not really far removed from Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us about reflection and using our minds and using our intellect and thinking and pondering in so many different places in the Quran. So the idea of being reflective and thinking is really where we engage people in order to find responses to the challenges that they are sort of bringing. The other thing that maybe I can talk about a little bit, and then I'll stop, is maybe thinking about the themes, common themes. So I work with couples, I work with individuals, and I also work with complete families, that is parents and their children. So when we're doing family work or couple work, there is a common theme that is coming through again and again is lack of communication. For example, people are bringing that up as a challenge, and it really is a challenge. In couple work, one of the things we are seeing is also people are coming up with different self-diagnosis, if you like, or we hear that, oh, he's a narcissist, or she's a narcissist. And so there are so many different ways that people are approaching challenges that they're having. And so maybe the idea of not starting to do self-diagnosis and labeling can also be helpful in thinking about how to resolve challenges that families are having. So I guess that's where I'll leave that. But I think the idea is that therapists don't tell people what to do, but they help people to find the solution in whatever the problem is. And sometimes you think, but do I need to go to someone? Sometimes having a third person helps, because you just create that ability where people can listen to each other in a better way, whereby conversation can remain a conversation, not become an argument. So those are the kinds of things we help in. But all in all, the families and couples are the experts. And we're experts in theories and understanding of human functionality, the psychology, the sociology, but when it comes to individual families, it's down to the families themselves who can resolve the issue. So yes, we have an expertise in the understanding, but not in people's lives. I guess that's how I would put it.
No, Jazakallah khair for that. And I think it's very beneficial what you were saying in just setting out, I think, people's expectations. And just to sort of underscore that point, these sessions are not general Islam Q&A sessions. They are related. If you have specific questions about your own situation, whether it's marriage, family, or relationships, and we've had questions which are quite generic. So I would encourage you to think about any issues that you want assistance on personally. You can ask them here. We are live currently on social media as well. So if you want, you can post comments on there. We do have a lot of questions already, but please do feel free to post more questions. We'll get through them over the coming weeks, inshallah. So without any further delay, I will start with the questions. Now, we will work through these, Sister Rahma. If you feel like more information, we can maybe answer these another week, but I'll go through them initially. So the first question is, and we've hidden the name of the people just to maintain anonymity and slightly adjusted some of the questions to facilitate that. So question number one, my mum and dad have been fighting over simple issues for the past 20 years. It has impacted my whole life. I don't know what to do. How do I deal with it without crossing Sharia boundaries and not offending them? So that is the question.
So I think there we start to think about, first of all, the relationship. So there is parents and there's a child. But if we're looking at the amount of time that is being specified here, it is suggesting that the person who is asking this question is now a grown-up, is now an adult. And what they want to know is how can they be helpful to what they have grown up with, and that still continues in looking at how parents are not in agreement and they fight over simple issues, and how can they be helpful without crossing the Sharia boundaries and not offending them. So it depends on the quality of the relationship between this person who is asking, who is a child, not a child in a child who is underage, but we're thinking in relationship terms, their parents, therefore he's their son or she's their daughter. So the question is, what does the quality of the relationship look like between the daughter or the son who is asking and the parents? That's the first thing. Because if the quality of that relationship is good, then offering help, offering advice, having a conversation about how those behaviors are and the impact of those behaviors on this person who is asking the question is a conversation they can have with their parents. But if the quality of the relationship is not good, it becomes very, very difficult, even if what they're saying does not cross the boundaries of the Sharia. So that becomes a challenge in so many different ways, because one of the things that people always would want to do is to make sure that their parents are pleased with them. And the idea in Islam is that the parents have a right to be respected, you want them to be thinking about you positively as their young adult child. So if whatever you say to them will really be determined on the quality of the relationship. And as I said in the beginning, that's where it's difficult, because we don't tell people what to do. What we think about is, how does your relationship look like? So the person who is asking the question can answer that question. And then if the relationship, because once people become adults, between parents and adults, the only thing that remains between them in that relationship, the relationship is the vehicle. How you can give them advice, even parents giving advice to their young adults, the vehicle is the relationship. If the relationship is positive and it works well, then you can take feedback, you can take some advice. But if the relationship, the quality of the relationship is not as positive, then it's a challenge. And so then maybe if you have an auntie, an uncle, somebody who your parents respect and that person can step in to help, maybe that's the vehicle that can be used. But the young adult can. I don't think the Sharia says not to. Because when we become adults, when our children become adults, we have a duty of helping one another in walking through this journey of life. But if the quality of the relationship is not good, then giving feedback can be challenging. I think that's where I would leave it. So then the question to the person who is asking from me is, what does your relationship look like? And is your relationship positive enough as a vehicle for you to begin to address the challenges that you're facing or are involved in your lives? I guess I'm doing what the therapists do. We ask more questions than answers. So I'll leave it there, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for that. So, moving on to our second question. So it's I don't have access to my kids because of the lies of my wife and the social services, police and court. I've not been charged with any offence and they don't have any facts against me. However, I'm not allowed to see my kids and they can't see me. What should I do?
That's a very interesting question, because there's a lot of things happening here. So one of the suggestions about this question, some kind of allegation has been made. We don't know what it is. The father himself says he doesn't know. But there's a few things mentioned in this question: social services, the police, and the court. So it's almost suggesting that there has been some kind of hearing or some kind of presenting the case to court. So the question again, I'm doing the therapist thing again here. The question to this dad is, what is it that he's being accused of? Does he have a lawyer? Does he know what exactly they're saying? Those are all the questions. He's not allowed to see the children. By who? Is it the authorities? Is it the professional system that is saying he can't? Because I'll struggle with that if they say that. One of the things we know is that in social services, children's services, when they're involved with a family, the idea of contact, children having contact with both parents, is very important. And it is so important because there's an idea and a belief that it is important in helping children to develop their identity and to understand their lives. It's also important for the child's mental health and the parent's mental health. So there are so many things that we think in the profession that it's helpful for the children to have contact with both parents. Now, even if that parent has been accused of something, that they've done something and the children are not safe, there is mechanisms in place where there is supervised contact. So, but contact itself is something that is very high on the agenda, that children need to have contact with both parents. There's supervised contact, there's centers where children can be brought in and the father, and it's all supervised. So I think what this father needs to do, if he's got a lawyer, I would say, is to go back to the lawyer and find out who is saying he can't see the children. Because the other thing we know as a family couple therapist, one of the things I know for sure that I see in my work is that sometimes when parents disagree and they separate, sometimes the mums prevent the dads from seeing their children. So who is saying he's saying here, I'm not allowed, but by whom? That's a question back to him. And if he's got a solicitor, because in this case, when cases have gone to court, and normally both parents do have a solicitor. So I'm just speaking in the way that I know the process works. So I would suggest to you, the dad, to go back to your solicitor or even social services. You know, social services, their job is to support people. So it could be a situation that is just unfortunate and something has happened and they have to remove the children, but their role is normally supporting the parents and making sure that for the best interest of the children, that the children have contact. So that's what I would say. Again, I leave there. I end that question with a question to the father, who says he's not allowed, and he needs to find out the reasons. And yes, there is supervised contact. So he could maybe put that forward as a suggestion, as a question, and see what they say. But it's too general for me to say anything more. I'll leave it to that.
No, Jazakallah khair, and with all these questions, if you want any further clarification, feel free to email us, because I think we were discussing the questions earlier. Because of the generic makeup, we weren't able to get into some of the details, but we'd be happy to look into that. And there are support providers when it comes to these issues. It is a recurring reality, and I think getting specialist advice legally is definitely a good way to go. And I think children's services, obviously, social services is very good, inshallah. Okay, so we got quite a varied set of questions. Next one. Right, it's I want to keep the Sunnah beard, but my wife doesn't allow it because she prefers it shaven. I've tried to be the best husband possible by helping her in household work, going out on weekdays, and giving time to her and her children. However, it doesn't work.
That's an interesting question. The way I'm sort of hearing that question, it's almost suggesting that he's not the dad, and I don't know if that's correct. Giving time to her and her children as opposed to our children. So it's just a question in my mind. But let's go back to the question. He wants to keep a beard. He wants to keep his a beard as a way of fulfilling the sunnah. The question for me, I think, that comes to mind is, what was the basis of their marriage? What were the things, what were their dreams? What were your dreams and hopes in marrying this wife? I think that's a question. Did you marry this wife, both of you being on the common ground of wanting to apply sunnah in your lives? Or are you coming into the idea of wanting to apply sunnah in your life after you were both off path and now you want to come on path? So there's a lot of questions I have before I even consider what the answer is, because what we think about in marriage in Islam is that you marry someone for a reason, and we know we have 4 reasons for marrying someone from the Sunnah, from the Hadith. So this wife doesn't want you to keep a beard. What is her purpose in being married to you, and what is your purpose in being married to her? And what are you running your life upon? Yani, what are you following? How are you learning your life? Where do you get your values and ideas of how to do life? So I don't know if the beard is just the beard, or is it telling us a story about her position with the application of Islam in your lives as a whole? That is really the question that is coming in my mind. And I don't know how to respond, except that I have more questions. The idea of marrying together, marrying someone, is you talk about how you want to live your life, what you're upon, what path are you on. But there is a possibility that sometimes people get married when they were on the same path, which is a little bit off, and then they decide to come onto the path. And if you're just starting together to come onto the path, maybe it's a bit too much for her. And it's the idea of her understanding that although you're a couple married, there are areas that every single person in the relationship will have to be responsible, and in response to their responsibility, responding to Allah. So just because your wife doesn't want it, it doesn't mean that you go by it, especially when the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that there is no obedience to creation in disobedience to the Creator. So if the Sunnah, we also know that the Prophet ﷺ did not tell us to do things out of his desires and whims. Everything that came to him is a guidance and is revelation in different ways. So I would say that there's a distinction. You know, there's this idea that we think about we're a couple, and then we're thinking about we're a family. But there isn't a we without an I, and there isn't an I without a we. So in the couple, there is an I. There are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask you about and her about, and you both have to individually respond, despite the fact that you're supposed to be making joint decisions, raising a family together. So I think it's drawing that distinction and helping your wife to like your beard. So keep it neat, brush it, perfume it, and encourage her to love it. But I don't know if there's anything I could say other than that. And Allah knows best.
No, Jazakallah khair. I think, as we said before, I think a bit more context, a bit more detail would be very helpful. And I guess what you're saying is, a beard could just be symptomatic of wider issues in terms of kind of a vision of where you want to go. And it's a challenge, I guess, because people do evolve differently, take different journeys sometimes at different stages in their life.
Mm.
And quite common actually for many brothers, many sisters to start kind of practicing according to the Sunnah at a later stage in life when they're married. So it's something, as you rightly pointed out, your individual obligation. I really like that. There's I always. Why? So I think that yeah. So I think that's really great. Just to remind you all that we are hosting this live Q&A session with Sister Rahma Abdul-Lateef. She's a qualified and experienced counsellor. And if you do have any questions, we are live currently on our platform, My Muslim Family, and just exclusively for the first few sessions, we'll also be live on social media across Facebook and also across YouTube. So feel free to ask any questions. I must stress the question should be related to specific issues that you are facing across marriage, relationships, and family in general. So please feel free to ask any questions. Moving swiftly on to our fourth question. Right. I am a divorced mother and I want to get married secretly without my parents' consent, so as to avoid zina.
Mm. Again, that is a very, very interesting question, and I think we could actually have benefited a bit more with more context. But I think there's so many questions again that that question is raising. So for someone who is divorced and wants to get married again, why in secret? Why is it, what invites secrecy? And why wouldn't you want your parents to know? Especially if you are married, they will see you with this man or whatever. How will you do that? How will you? I'm just not understanding, why do you need to do it in secret? I guess that's really the end of the question is brilliant. To avoid zina, of course. That is not only saying that you want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to look after your own soul and your own idea of being a believer and working within the boundaries set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why in secret? Especially you are already a divorced woman who is got children or a child, you're already a mother. Why? That's my question. I'm really curious about the secrecy. What is inviting this idea of doing it in secret without your parents knowing? And so that question goes back to the person who sent the question, inshallah. Wallahu alam. Allah knows best.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So the next question, we actually looked at it and we broke it down to three parts. And it's being a sister whose son has left Islam. So, subhanAllah. So the first part of the question is, my son left Islam when he was in secondary school. He is now early 20s and lives away from home. So I've kind of paraphrased that now to shorten it up. So yeah, I mean, we discussed this a bit earlier. So I think you wanted to go into a bit more detail with some of the...
So the first, I think the first question that again came to my mind is the idea that this son left Islam when he was in secondary school. How old was he? Had he reached that age of puberty and said, this is a choice I'm making? And at that point, as a child in the family home, what kinds of things did the parents do to help him with that decision or that choice? I think all those are questions I have. And then the question that comes to my mind, or the idea that comes to my mind, is that this is actually a very common thing where there are so many challenges about this idea of Islam and young people growing up. There is an idea that the young people decide, or they tell their parents they don't want Islam for so many different reasons. And sometimes when they say, I don't want to be a Muslim, it doesn't always mean that they mean they don't want Islam or they don't believe in Islam. In my experience, some of the young people that I work with, they say that because they want to be able to have the freedom to do a lot of things that maybe they can't do because they're Muslims. So sometimes it's just that peer pressure age group, and they want to by telling the parents that, it's almost like back off. It just gives them that gap that the parents can back off, and so they can sort of do what they need to do. That's one possibility. So when he was at home, I'm just curious in what did the parents do to help him to think about it differently? What areas of education did he require and support to understand this thing that he says he doesn't want or he doesn't believe in? Because he's only young. Secondary school, we are thinking about age 11 till age 16. It's between that age range. They are still young, they're still developing their ideas. What did you do as a parent? That's my question. And if you did anything, what was his response? So that would be another question. And now that he's in his 20s, he's an adult. So I guess what comes to my mind is, what is this parent thinking that their responsibility as a parent is towards that young adult now? And I think the way I understand it, and it might not be correct, but I think that once the child, when these people become young adults, they've been given the training of what is required, what you need to do, what the do's and don'ts. Yani, you've been helped to access all these boundaries that are set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think then they make the choice, and then they're becoming responsible. Again, there is an I in the we. I'm your mother, but I will be held responsible as myself, and you will be held responsible as yourself. Again, we go back to that. So I don't know if this mother is feeling responsible up until now, even if this young person is now in their 20s. So yeah, really, that is the question that comes to my mind, is what does this parent think at this point? Is it just the worry that their child is not a Muslim? Is it a matter of shame? Because we have all those things happening to us as a community, or in the community. Is it a shame? Am I responsible? Do you feel guilty? Are people saying you didn't do enough? So there is all those things that organize us in these things. But the question is, now that he's a young adult, do you feel that you have the responsibility as a parent towards making sure that he is a Muslim? I guess that's my question.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So there's another part to that question. So we'll go into that. My son now lives away from home and does not listen to any da'wah videos I send, nor read the Quran when I encourage him. He has left Islam because he says he cannot take knowledge from a prophet who had a wife who was 6 years old. Subhanallah.
So, when I sort of hear that question, saying that he's living away now, the first part of the question was that he left Islam when he was in secondary school. So if at the time when he was at home, he made a decision that he didn't want Islam, the second part of the question, talking about him living away and not listening to any dawah videos, he had already made his decision. And when he was staying at home with his Muslim family, he opted out. So when the mom puts this question out to us now, when I hear it from my psychotherapy ears, or the therapist in me is hearing what we call an expectation. this mother has got their expectation that her child should listen to dawah videos. She sends him Quran videos, but he already told you he doesn't want it. And at the time he said it, he was at home. So there was more, you could have been able to influence him more, given that he was young and he was at home. Now that he's a young adult, not living at home, I think it's very difficult to have that kind of expectation, because he's already outlined what his choice is. And I guess there we think about the idea of guiding. As a mom, I think, or as a parent, the idea of guiding, we guide, we teach, we help to promote the teachings of Islam, the love of Allah, the love of the Prophet ﷺ in our children's lives, hearts, not only by talking. I think we have this in our community where we think, and we use the idea of practice. I don't practice Islam. And I think because it's not a practice. And I think about it that way as a practitioner of mental health. So I think I am not doing psychotherapy all the time. So I practice it in clinic. And when I'm out of the clinic, I am not practicing psychotherapy. So that's why for me personally, I don't consider Islam as a practice. I consider it as a way of life. Because Islam teaches us from the very minute thing we do in our lives to the biggest thing we do in our lives. So for example, from the moment you open your eyes, there is something you need to say or do as a Muslim. How you wake up. What do you say when you open your eyes? What do you say before you fall asleep? So there is a guideline, and there's things we do at every step of the way, which is a way of life. So our role as parents is to guide, to teach, to help, to do Islam. Not just talking it, but doing it. Children learn more from what they see us doing than what we are telling them to do. So there's a distinction between theory and practice. If you give it as a theory and not back it with how you implement it and how you apply it, it just becomes something that is said. So it's a lived experience. Islam is a way of life. After you have done your best, the guiding of the heart is not in anybody's hand. That is something that is in the hands of Allah. So then your job is pray, teach and pray. You are teaching your children and you are making dua. So I would say to this mom, one of the things that she can do is making lots of dua to Allah, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help her son to come back to the deen, to come back to the belief. The idea of him saying that because the Prophet ﷺ married someone who was 6 years old, I don't know if I really want to entertain that as a good enough reason, because in my work with young people, there are so many things they tell me. I've worked with young girls who are telling me, I will never marry a Muslim man. And some of the reasons they tell me is because Muslim men are not, they're not romantic, they're boring. Muslims are boring. Those are the kinds of things that sometimes young people tell me. So really, when you hear that, it's not so much that they don't want to believe or they don't believe, but they're just finding reasons to say, well, I like this and I like this and I don't think Muslims do that. So yeah, and I leave it to that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but it's a challenge, and we have so many different challenges that parents are facing with children, and children making choices, and whether those are the right choices or not. And I'm guessing what I'm saying is for people with very young children, I think sitting back and thinking they're too young to understand is something that I would say rethink. If you're one of those parents think, oh, they're still a baby. It's very important to start as you're meant to carry on. And with that, dua. So in the Quran, we have a dua where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we pray, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to be leaders who are righteous. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. We make that dua. So we're making the guidance, we're making the dua, we're asking Allah to help us, because we don't have the capacity to guide, but we have the capacity to train and teach and help and implant the love of the deen and the love of Allah, but not telling them you have to love Allah. They have to see that love growing and developing in you as the parents. Wallahu ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I think I'll leave it to that.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So there's the final part of that question. My husband, who is not his biological father, wants us to stop communication, but I am his mother and I have emotions. How should I respond?
That's a very, very, very difficult situation to be in for anyone, anybody, any parent to be in that situation is a very difficult situation. And I think what even makes it more complicated here is that this is a stepfather and not a biological father. However, it's very difficult in thinking about what kind of connection do you want with your son. He doesn't live at home. He's a young adult. He's completely on a different manhaj, a different way of life. So we would say that the relationship you can keep with him is one of advising him or even finding help through other people who you think will be better, in a better position to help him and support him and have those kinds of conversations with him and let him have all the questions he wants to raise, and maybe they can answer those questions to help him clarify his ideas of Islam. That would be one way. I think it is permissible to hold, and I'm saying this very tentatively, I'm not giving a scholarly response here. I think you can tentatively hold ties and exchanging gifts or giving him gifts with an intention of encouraging him to come back to Islam. Otherwise, it's a big challenge. What do you do? How do you respond? What is the purpose of your wanting to be in contact? What is it that your husband is objecting to? So he's saying he wants you to stop all communication. What is he objecting to? I think there's a little bit more understanding that is required there. What does he see in this relationship of yours with your son? And what type of communication are you having? Is he objecting to your responses? Are you okay and saying you're okay, you don't care, you don't mind? What is it that he's objecting to? That's the bit that I'm not understanding. So then it makes it a bit difficult. So I guess this would be a situation where you need to get maybe some family members to intervene and help you with your husband in thinking about the best way forward, What are his reasons of saying stop all communication? And once you understand his reasons, how might you respond? Does he understand your reasons, why you want to make contact? And I think it's all that. What are your intentions? What are his intentions? What is your husband's relationship with your son? So there are so many different layers to be understood and to be thought through for us to really be able to help. However, it's difficult, it's a challenge, it's a very big test. Separation, parent and child, is a very difficult thing. And especially in this case, you are worried about your child's akhirah, you are worried about him not accepting and being a Muslim. Lots of dua and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide him and help him. Nothing is impossible with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is possible. And this is a question from a mother. We also know that the parents' dua is very powerful. So it's making lots of dua, asking the one who can. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who can turn his heart back. So you need to be making that dua, and it's a big test. In no way am I reducing it, but I think there is a lot more that needs to be understood between you and your husband and your son. And once those layers are understood, what is he objecting to? What is his relationship with your son? What types of communications are you having? How often? You know, there's another big thing that is intruding on us as a community, but I guess I'm going to leave that there to that question, is that maybe the solution that I would say here is to get somebody to help you and your husband to think through this and to resolve it. One way or another, you need to be on the same page because you're in a relationship together. And so that's where I would leave it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put ease in this matter, because it's not an easy situation that you are in. As a mom, it's very painful for you. And then you have your husband whom you need to be in a mutual relationship where you are in agreement in the things that you are doing together as husband and wife. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Jazakallah khair. Just to widen out the question a little bit, you raised the question really in terms of what are the reasons possibly why the husband wants to not have that interaction, and in a lot of kind of cases that I've kind of come across, and it may be true here, it may not be, I'm not sure, but there are other children that the couple have, and often sometimes there's a tendency of wanting to, if one child has kind of gone astray, to want to protect their other kind of siblings. I guess what's a better way of approaching this? Because obviously, what level of obligation do you have to your child when they're an adult, as Muslim parents? I guess that's a key question as well. So maybe you just elaborate a little bit upon that, inshallah.
So I don't know if really I've thought about that, in what responsibility does the parents have on their adult children. I don't know if there is any. I think it becomes mutual in the sense that you're no longer responsible for providing for them. You're no longer responsible for encouraging them to say, now it's Salah time, go and pray. I think we need to remind each other as grown-up adults. But I think it becomes an individual responsibility now that they are young adult. They are responsible and accountable. But cultures work very differently. So what are we really talking to here? When we are thinking from an Islamic perspective, my understanding, and which might not be that there isn't, might be something different that I don't know yet, but from what I know is that when the children are young adults, they are adults. And we do not have the same responsibility or a similar responsibility that we had when they were dependent on us. They've now become independent, they're baligh, they've left, he's 20, 23, they're working, they're married, they're living their lives. I don't know if we have the same responsibility that we had when they were dependent on us. Maybe there is something, but I don't know, I haven't come across it. But we have the responsibility of respect. We respect them, they respect us. We help them, they help us in whatever way, whatever form. But culturally, when we are now starting to think in terms of culture, parents are not the same thing across all cultures. Children are not the same thing across all cultures. So then there we go into different complexities. There is cultures where even adult children have to completely take permission from their parents for everything. There is cultures where parents are expected to carry on parenting in that way. So you have to completely take permission. If I disapprove, you just sit there and become miserable in your life, despite the fact that you're an adult. So I guess my answer is when we hear parents and families and children, it's not the same thing across cultures. But when we're thinking about it from an Islamic perspective, I don't know if parents have a responsibility that they had towards their children when those children were vulnerable and dependent upon them, to when those children become adults and independent of them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. So we just had a new question that's come through. I have a 10-year-old boy with autism. Most days, alhamdulillah, go well. He's mostly a really happy child. But some days are more challenging. He can become quite stubborn and really argues with me when he wants his way and thinks he's right. How do you advise I remain calm and patient during meltdowns, as some days I realize I may snap back or get irritated, which makes me feel terrible later?
So the question is that there is a 10-year-old who is autistic. But
Yes.
we're not thinking about the condition. We're thinking about mum and her ability to remain patient. Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question. How do you advise I remain calm and patient during meltdowns, as sometimes I realize I may snap back and I feel terrible later?
Okay. So one of the things that I don't know what you do. I don't know what the mum does when there is a meltdown. One of the things that keep people in control, or mums, when children have a meltdown, when children become argumentative, one of the things that a parent can do that keeps you in control is stop and think about what's happening. I think it's very easy to be caught up in the autopilot way of being. When they're shouting, you're busy, maybe you're stressed. So it's being very much in contact with yourself on an emotional level. Where are you emotionally? Where are you spiritually? Where are you? Because when we are raising children, we are thinking about being available and being present. And a parent that is helping their child to develop at a level that is healthy, you need to be present on 4 different levels. Present physically, emotionally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. So it's 4 levels. Your being present physically is not enough. So when you are thinking about where you are emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, that will help you to know how to respond. Shouting is completely not a helpful strategy. There is an idea in my work, in the way we understand this thing that we call control, that when you start shouting, your child completely understands that you have lost control. And whenever there is 2 people in a situation, when you lose control, I gain it. So when the young person, when the child knows that you have no control, they're in control. So therefore, they run the show. So the idea is this: when they start the meltdown, if you are standing up, you can sit down. And it's amazing. It is so amazing when you start thinking about these ideas of when you're sitting. You know, the Prophet ﷺ taught us something about how to work with anger. Said if you're standing up, sit down. If you're sitting down, lie down. Make a wudu, take a drink of water. We actually give those ideas or guidelines in people parenting. That idea of changing your space helps you to connect to connect with yourself. So if they start a meltdown, get a feeling of what is happening for you at that point before you even think about what's happening for them. Secondly, the other thing we invite parents to think about, and I don't know another way of saying it, I'm just going to say it the way we say it in my area of work, is the idea of mentalization. So what do we mean by that? Is you attempt to mentalize your child in what is going on for them at this moment in time. Can you imagine from your adult stance in what is going on for them? And when you start doing that, you find ways of. So if sitting down with them and just staying calm, not doing anything helps them, then that's what you do. If picking them up and talking to them helps, that's what you do. One of the ways that one of the things that makes it very difficult for parents is there's all these things about expectations. People are watching, maybe people are expecting me to manage and I'm not managing. So there is so much more that happens for the parent, and it becomes that thing about expectations again. But if you listen to yourself and think about understanding what it is that you need to do that will work, then you do that. Another question that we normally put forward to people and say, what works best? That is something we don't normally think about or consider. We get a lot of people telling us all the things that don't work. So my second idea would be what works. Learn and understand what works and do more of what works. Because when you strengthen this, when you make what works stronger, what doesn't work weakens. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Rahma, for that. I think that brings us to the end of our session. We actually did have more questions coming in, but we will park them for another session, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. I think that was a very beneficial session, and a lot of questions which I think require a lot more consideration as well in terms of some of the specifics. But Jazakallah khairan. I'm not sure how you found that, but I thought it was very beneficial. So inshallah, we look forward to having you with us again. And I would like to thank you on behalf of my Muslim family and looking forward to future sessions that we'll be having. So on behalf of me, I'd like to say assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And to all our viewers, this is my Muslim family. You are tuning in to our first live Q&A session regarding questions related to Muslim families, parenting, relationships, specific things that you want questions or answers for your specific issues. My Muslim family has a vision to see a world where Muslim families are loving, strong, focused on the hereafter, and high achieving. You can check out our platform. We have over 20 courses currently live addressing a number of issues designed to work towards the things that I've mentioned in terms of being loving and strong and focused on the hereafter and high achieving. Go to our website www.mymuslimfamily.com. But from all of us here today, I'd like to say Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.